Well, welcome back, everyone, to the 16th episode of the Tundra cast. Once again, we got Quarrel, we got Mr. Jacob, and for the first time in a while, we got Mr. Siakam here. And once again, we're having another guest. He's a Toronto Maple Leafs reporter for the Athletic and the Hockey News. And the timing cannot have been better after, let's just say, an interesting game by the Maple Leafs last night. So yeah, we have David Alter coming up.
Um, Me and I think it's Ryan. We're Leafs fans. First of all, we were crying last night, cried ourselves to sleep. Shay and Jacob decided to laugh at us for the rest of the night. So first of all, just what were your thoughts on that loss?
Well, I mean, like it's natural if you're a Leaf fan to look at what happened and just kind of shake your head and feel like here we go again, and this team is the same and and all that stuff. Like I would kind of understand it, but when you look at how the team has kind of played up until this point, I think they have earned a bit of the benefit of the doubt that this could be a situation where they learned in a not so great way that they can't do this, and that even though they may be the very best team in this division right now and they don't have tougher competition from the other three divisions, that teams like the Senators can still bring it and counterattack and still not allow you to have an off shift. I think it was an important lesson that way. I think if this was the second or third game of the season this happens, I think there's probably cause to be concerned. But I think defensively, you have to like what the Leafs have brought this season, that you can at least kind of look at this as maybe this is a one-time thing. They're still atop in the division. And if this becomes an ongoing pattern, then I'm kind of concerned about it.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, the like outside of the this last game, I mean, and maybe the first matchup that the Leafs had with the Senators, the Leafs in general have played relatively responsible, a lot better in the defensive zone. I think a lot of the additions this year that they've made on that blue line and bringing the veteran presence has helped with that. But you know, what it comes down to is what I was wondering is how much do you think a guy like Wayne Simmons has on that locker room and on the ice in those kinds of moments? Because when I was watching the third period and the second period last night, the one thing I was wondering was, when man, we need that energy play, and it just never kind of came.
I think it does have some effect. I think they really needed. I don't think that was solely what happened there, because they had the boost of Joe Thornton being back. That if there's going to be a guy who's going to rile everyone to kind of get their wits about them, he would seem to fill that role rather well. I'm not saying he could do it on his own, but it's not like they didn't have that presence on the bench. Sure, I mean, the more the better. That definitely helps.
Right.
I think the Leafs have been hurt by Simmons not being there in other elements of their game, particularly on the power play,
Yeah.
and perhaps as an energy guy on that third line and what he was kind of bringing on that second line, but specifically the power play, I think they're really lacking there. Yeah, I mean, like, look, they brought those guys. They brought him. They brought Jumbo. They brought Bogosian as free agents to be the kind of bright spot guys that can kind of help teach and learn and bring up morale and also bring it on the ice too. And so it definitely does add to it. But I don't know how much that would have stopped what happened from happening, just because they did have some of that element on the bench with them.
How much do you think the return of Joe Thornton, like him scoring goals, he had a pretty good game. Like the whole team had a pretty good game, really, up until, of course, the collapse. How much do you think that team really enjoys having Thornton on the bench? And you could tell how happy they were when Thornton was scoring and passing and stuff like that.
Yeah, you can see like the thing that's very evident, and it's weird because it's all Zoom and we're not in the room to see a lot of the things that in normal times we can kind of get a better feel for, and talking one on one and cultivating relationships and whatnot. But at least on the Zooms, when you look at body language, the moment he comes up, there's an immediate smile on everybody's face. And I think that's probably where the positive effect of it comes from. We hear all these legendary stories about Thornton and the kind of positive effect he's had on the room, and it seems like for a lot of these younger guys, it was a necessary add. Something that they were pursuing him for a couple of years. They only got him this season, but you can see that he brings a positive effect for that room for sure.
So I just want to move away from the Leafs for a quick second. Just about the whole sports media industry in general. Like, given the amount of layoffs that Bell Media just did, with radio stations being cut, Dan O'Toole and Natasha S. like Brant Wallace, these pretty big names in sports media in Canada. Where do you think the industry's heading into the future?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's going to sound weird to say, but I don't think the industry is dying in any sense. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be newer players, and there's just going to be a bunch of smaller companies happening as a result of this. Like, I think you're going to have your mainstays and your rights holders, and they're still going to be big and powerful and do things. But I think what's going to happen is there's just so much talent left on the table and so many different ways to express yourself, and a lot of different newer companies with newfound money that are willing to try and experiment and jump in, that are going to take a chance on a lot of these free agents in there and try to create something different in the marketplace. I've been through 3 different transition layoff things for myself. I'm only full-time back on the beat with the hockey news for the beginning of this season. The last couple of years, I was working behind the scenes at TSN in the web department. But as far as a day-to-day beat reporter, I've gone through this transition with a startup, with a broadcaster, with Sportsnet, with a newspaper, with the National Post. I've been through this, and it's a tough thing to go through. And a lot of times you think you're finished, but if those people that are out are still passionate and want to do it, they'll find a way back, because you can't keep good people down.
Yeah. How did you start out from where you are now, reporting for the hockey news?
Well, I'll try and keep it as short as possible. But I went to Western to study economics, and I didn't think I would work in this field. But my second year at Western, I was a res soph, which is like a guy who lives, not a don, but someone who lives, an upper year student who lives in res again. And I was put on an all media faculty floor to kind of be a frosh leader there. And they kind of were an influence to get me to go to a campus radio info session. This was back in 2003, 2002. And that turned into learning, they actually do sports here, to spending all of my free time there, to wanting to do this for a career if possible, because I saw some people in the industry had volunteered at this place, to an 8-year career at the Fan and Sportsnet, where my last 3 years were as Leaf reporter, to transition to writing for the Leafs website for one season in 14-15, to working at the National Post, to working at The Athletic, and working at a bunch of these other different places and freelancing and hustling to where I am right now, and just staying on top of new trends, dabbling in different digital fields and products. And I've always been very tech minded. I think that's kind of what's allowed me to continue my career, is I'm very experimental in the ways I do things, in terms of new platforms and trying things out that people really haven't kind of done before, just to see if it works. And that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it, really.
Yeah, it's really interesting, honestly, to hear how different reporters are making it up to where they are now. Of course, we've had Chris Johnston on; he's a big name. Justin Emerson, he's a big name in Vegas. It's definitely interesting to hear that.
Yeah, and I know Chris just because when I started up the ranks, he was going through CP, and CP, through CP became national hockey writer to moving to Sportsnet, where we were teammates for one season, I think, where I was working at the Fan in 13, 14, or it might have been two seasons actually for when he joined Sportsnet after the lockout in 2013, and I was working on the radio side, so nothing but respect for him, and yeah, it's everyone's got their own path, but like I say to anyone, if you commit everything to it and try to just keep engaging content going, you'll find your path, and but you have to also be prepared that it's very trepidatious and volatile, and you should always just kind of keep an open mind with a lot of things as well.
So just back on the Leafs for a sec here. Obviously they made a move yesterday. They got Alex Galchenyuk from the Carolina Hurricanes. It was reported today that they're interested on Mikael Granlund. So, what are your thoughts on those types of moves? Galchenyuk, he's been a journeyman around the league. It's his seventh organization in the last 3 years, and Granlund would be a half decent top six forward for that group in Toronto.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of fitting it under the cap or waiting until later in the season if there's more accrued cap space in order to make it. It's funny because, we get into the sports industry to just focus on sports and whatnot, but the job has evolved so much that now you really have to understand methodology and economics, and that is a lot of behind what the Leafs are doing. I'll give you an example. Like my cousin today, he just reached out to me. He's like, I don't understand why they would make this Galchenyuk move. And to me, it was kind of obvious just looking at it from a numbers standpoint. If you understand the salary cap and you understand the timing of why, and you can explain and articulate how and why these moves are made, it's perfect. So, one, he's a small cap hit. I believe it was 1.1. I didn't look at it exactly, but it's small cap hit for 1 year for a guy who was drafted so high, who has scored 30 goals in the league, who's not found the right situation. The Toronto Maple Leafs spend more than any other team when it comes to skills development and consultants and everyone that they have on their staff, that players can come in and work on that and fix deficiencies in their game. And the other part of that is they waited till after waivers so they can move him up and down the taxi squad, that it doesn't affect their daily cap hit in situations where he's working on his game and they're not putting him into the lineup immediately. Also, the Jimmy VC experiment may not be working. There's that element too. He's kind of not been the high value offensive producer that they maybe thought he could turn into. And so you kind of saw that with his move to the fourth line. But yeah, it's really just about understanding the economics and the situation with everything that it makes a lot of moves. And with Granlund, yeah, they can a top six winger that makes sense. Like if you can add that kind of piece at the deadline where you can theoretically add a player of that kind of cap hit minus maybe trading another player away, that makes a lot of sense. But a lot of it is knowing and understanding economics and being able to articulate it to people who don't, to really fully understand what the Leafs are doing and why their interests are what they are.
And to make the cap work, there's been rumors about Pierre Engvall being on the move. Could he be a potential trade asset for the Leafs if they want to make a big move like that?
Well, I mean, you have to find a suitor. That's the weird thing about this season. Ever since COVID hit, I think you're seeing it right now. The only assets that are like surefire waiver pickups are backup goalies.
Oh,
Like
Yeah.
Everyone else, forwards wise, are just passing through, it seems. And if there's anything the Leafs proved with Jason Spezza, is if you're a minimum player, you can easily just say, I'm not going to report, have your contract terminated, and stay anyway, that it's a deterrent to even try to make the waiver claim. So in Pierre Engvall's case, it's a little bit different because his cap hit is 1.2. It's not the league minimum. But if you put him on waivers now, which he's now eligible for after playing in that last game he played in, I'm not so sure anyone takes him because they have to keep him on that roster. And for a lot of teams, that's very prohibitive right now, given what we've seen in the salary cap. So I'm not so sure that necessarily is a thing for them risking losing. Do they want to upgrade in that spot? Sure, I think they do. And having them on the main roster, the cap hit is $75,000 or $175,000 when you bury him in terms of the burial overage. So I don't know if it makes that much of an impact. But yeah, I mean, from a roster standpoint, he could be used as part of a piece going forward if that team is interested in him specifically. I think he's got another year where he could be exposed in the expansion draft, and that could be part of the play there as well. Another reason why you'd want to keep him.
Yeah, so something else that I also noticed with the Galchenyuk trade was that at least they are running pretty low on contract space. They have to have you have maximum of 50 contracts, and they traded 2 to get 1. So that was also something I noticed. Just wanted to point it out for those who didn't know.
Yeah, but I saw that too. But I think they went from 47 to 46, if I remember correctly. Yep. And so, I mean, I think a little bit was made too much of that. Like, how many players are they really going to add between now and then? It gives them some flexibility, but I think they did it just in case. It was another throw-in. Warsofsky, I believe, is playing with his brother, who's a coach of the minor league team in Carolina.
That's nice.
And that was a it was like a brother sibling head coach situation, which hasn't been done in I don't know how many years. The AHL public relations person tweeted that out yesterday, which I thought was rather interesting. So, I mean, it might have been even thrown off sometimes in these situations, and the Leafs are very good about communicating situations with their prospects, that it's about doing things right for that person, that it might be better there, that there was really no upside in keeping them, that it could help there. I'm not saying that's necessarily exactly what happened, but going from 47 to 46 doesn't suggest to me that there was a real concern about the number 50 contract limit. I know it was mentioned. It's notable, but I don't think it was a substantial fact.
Okay, so obviously we heard about Granlund. Some other names like I follow Raquel have been thrown out there. Do you have any thoughts on any other top six swingers? Sorry.
I think that's it. I haven't really heard of anything else, to be honest with you. It's been the Leafs are very locked down when it comes to a lot of that information. So you kind of have to go through other sources. And full disclosure, it's one of those things where, having not been on the beat for day to day, I'm just now reestablishing a lot of my contacts that I've just been, hey, I'm back on the beat. Let's talk. So it's one of those things. And in an era of COVID where you can't have a face-to-face, that becomes very tough. So it's one of those things where I haven't heard anything beyond those, but it'll get there. I think right now is you're not going to see a lot of that talk until really teams start to realize they are out of it. Like in their respective divisions, that there's no postseason or what have you there, and it's such a weird season to really know what's going on in that regard.
Yeah. So, but there's also the fact that if it's from a player from an American team, there's gonna have to be a 2-week quarantine, and for the Leafs, they'd want to get as much time with that player as possible. So
that is true.
Yeah.
That is true. And so you you do want to do that earlier, but you also want to wait because if it's a cap space issue which the Leafs will have inevitably, even with guys on injured reserve right now, eventually they have to come off. Like Wayne Simmons will come off, and they'll have to deal with that. Same with Jack Campbell. And so what happens there is, if you're going to be taking guys, you have to take those 2 weeks into account, but you also have to wait later in the season for the daily accrued cap space to add up so you can take on a bigger contract.
Yep.
So it's a delicate balance. They're both factors. You're right about that. But maybe instead of before the trade deadline, 2 weeks, 14 days, or 15 days, or 16 days before the trade deadline is the real trade deadline for those players to figure out.
With Freddie Anderson's contract coming up, could you see Freddie leaving, or will the Leafs find a way to sign him?
So, yeah, I did a deep dive on this before the season started because it's bizarre. Like, being a goaltender in the free agent market right now is such a question mark. I think you have to look no further than October and what you saw with goalies there. Go the year before, and you had guys like the Florida Panthers goalie. Drawing the blank right now.
Bobrovsky.
Thank you very much. Bobrovsky making 10 in one off season, and now Matt Murray was the highest cap hit, and it was like $6.5 million this in Ottawa, and no one came close to that. Braden Holtby was a starter for Stanley Cup champion, goes to $4.3 million on a short-term 2-year deal. I think now with everything that's going on, with no sign that the cap space is going to increase in subsequent years, like was projected before COVID, you're just seeing teams reluctant to invest high cap hits on goalies. So what does that mean for Frederik Andersen? Well, he probably can't expect a huge raise beyond his 5 years, but behind his $5 million. So is he going to be comfortable with taking a bit of a haircut in that regard? He may have to. It may not have to be a substantial discount. But at the same time, what teams are out there that may want to have Anderson as their number 1 or 1A in that situation for a cap hit of the equal value? I don't see it. So I think the best situation for both the Leafs and him is longer term, slightly lower AAV than what he's making right now. I just don't know if Anderson is willing to accept that. And that's the real stalemate. Like, when you look at everything rationally, I don't see the situation unless maybe Seattle becomes a situation where they have the money to spend. But even then, I mean, I can see Seattle going for Marc-Andre Fleury now, and Marc-Andre Fleury making that leap, given he was so successful with Vegas and the hot start that he's on right now, and how weird and that situation was with Robin Lehner. So, yeah, a lot of factors there. I know it was a long-winded answer, and I apologize for that. I do that sometimes.
No worries.
But like, it's just regurgitating all my thoughts on it, that the situation with Anderson's very tough, and that I think teams are just not going to want to be paying that high cap hit for a goaltender with long-term. Like, it's just, it's right. Changed until we can get financial economic stability, and we know what it's like beyond COVID. It's going to be a tough market for goalies specifically out there.
Also, there's the fact. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. The one thing is, the Leafs are very. I feel like the Leafs are very reliant on Frederik Andersen as a roster. Jack Campbell's great. I love the guy. He's a great backup. But for me, at least, I feel like he's more of a tandem guy, like a Jake Allen in Montreal, where he's a very serviceable backup that can play a lot more games, but not necessarily a guy you want to carry the Lions' share of the workload, right? So if the Leafs were to strike out on a Frederik Andersen free agency, Freddie wants to get paid, there's a team in free agency that's willing to pay him, what would the Leafs' contingency plan look like? Do you go in-house? Do you go out in free agency and look for someone? Is Campbell the starter?
Well, here's the thing. We don't know if Campbell's capable of being a starter just yet. I think this was going to be the season before his injury where we were actually going to find that out. Because based on how condensed everything is, I really thought that we were going to see a lot more Jack Campbell. Like, that was the plan. Like, you even heard that from Sheldon Keefe himself. And he looked pretty good in those couple of games. Like, the main difference between him and Freddie, and it's not a fair comparison, and I want to stress that because the sample size is so small. But Campbell didn't look at times like he wasn't sure of his positioning in those two games. He looked really solid, really stable, and he's really been that kind of solution that, as a 1B, that's definitely right. But he hasn't had the runway to see what he can do with 30 to 40% of the games, which I think we were kind of gonna get there. So I think the Leafs are still kind of figuring it out as they go along, and they'll look at what the free agency plan is. I think based on what happens with the team, if Anderson carries them into a couple of rounds to where they get to the third round or further, then maybe they do commit to him again, but it's really too early to say. I know Joseph Wall was someone I was kind of interested in seeing because I kind of liked like how he played in his college days, and he's got that big frame that you like in a goalie, but I don't know how far along he is. But with a lot of these goalies, you don't know until you give them the chance, or injuries give them that chance. James Reimer came up based on several injuries to the Leafs back in 2010. So you just don't know until these situations present themselves. So it's gonna be interesting. But when Campbell comes back, he's gonna play a lot more games. The other question is, are we going to see Hutchinson get one of these two games in the first back-to-back without Jack Campbell tomorrow and Thursday against the Senators?
Yeah.
Also, just something we were talking about before. A lot of people agree that Frederik Andersen's comparable around the league is Jacob Markstrom, and he's signed his $6 million deal. And so far, Markstrom has been absolutely amazing. So you would have to think that Andersen comes under that by the end.
Yeah, I mean, he's been great for Calgary. I think so. I think economically, I don't know how much money is going to be available for him.
Yeah.
Like, if the cap stays flat and players get better, I don't see other teams aside from Toronto, who is already pressed for space and have other issues they need to address, like, do they re-up Zach Hyman for the same spot given what he does up front for this team? Or do you let him go? Like, there's a lot of other issues they need to address, defensemen that are due raises that I don't like. This is a fundamental issue across the board, and the cap is going to stay the same. So how much more space is there for Freddie? Like, I don't see the same, like, unless he really shoots the lights out and carries the team and is the reason this team goes super far, I don't see the same Markstrom money. I just don't. I see less unless that US TV contract is so damn good and COVID is relieved very quickly, and tickets and the arenas are filling up again, and all this revenue is made up. I just don't see the cap increasing to the point where there's going to be that room for him. It comes down to the economics, really.
All right. Well.
All right. Well, there's one obviously the Leafs are going to have a very busy offseason, but I feel like a lot of the moves that they're going to have in mind are going to rotate around the Seattle expansion draft. Protecting players, trying to figure out how to maneuver the rosters, and who do you think are the guys that the Leafs will definitely protect, and who do you think the guys are on the Leafs roster are going to be at risk of being taken, and what do you think? Like, what do you think the Leafs are in general right now in their preparation for the Seattle expansion draft?
I know you have to keep it in mind, but based on everything that's going on right now, apart from their core players, they're really in it for this year. Like, I think you've seen that in a lot of the moves, that they're really trying to get present value for their buck. So you look at it, it's the 7-3 and the 4-4 split. 7 forwards, 3 defense, or 4 forwards, 4 defensemen, 4 forwards, or 10 skaters, whatever it is. Yeah. So they're definitely gonna protect as many forwards as possible in that regard. So you have your 4, you have your big money 4. They're not going anywhere. Beyond that, when you look at who else is signed, you've got Riley, you've got Muzzin, Hall, I believe you protect just because of the value he's presenting there. That's your 3. You've got 4 others that you can kind of sprinkle in there. That's really where you go. And apart from that, there really isn't that much left. So I think they've set this up fine. Like, it's not really a matter of that. I think maybe you look some of their prospects that they have that are beyond the ELC stage or beyond a certain age, I think are probably most at risk. But to be honest with you, I haven't given it much thought.
All right.
My main concern is between assuming that Dermott stays on the roster. I mean, that's at least Dermott or him and or Brody if the Leafs protect Hall, Muzzin, and Riley. And
Right.
Brody has been, I mean, I wouldn't say they've been great, but he's definitely been Morgan Riley's best defense partner in his career.
Mention Brody, of course. Yeah. So you might have to go 4-4 in that regard, right?
Yep.
Like, if you're trying to protect the 4 defensemen, but that's a tough one. And you're right, Brody has been a stabilizing force. He's a guy the Leafs have targeted for a couple years. So, it's tough. The Dermott one, they like Dermott. They retain his rights beyond this season. And he's arbitration eligible this time. So, given the amount of games he's played and how well he's actually played with Bogosian, I think he's going to be in line for a raise, but they may have to let him go because of the raise that he's going to get and the other issues that they have to address. Like, there's going to be guys who are going to need raises and prospects beyond a certain point that you kind of have to leave the room there for them. So, yeah, Dermott's definitely a risk for sure.
And because of that, could you see him getting traded so the Leafs don't lose him for nothing?
But then they're going to lose someone else. So I think you have to be strategic in who you have there, knowing what you're going to lose, right? And I think if there's anything we learned from the Vegas expansion draft is you want to have this figured out now because you don't want to have to be brokering a deal where you're giving up more to fix the issue, like you saw with other teams like Columbus wanted to protect Anderson, right? So they said take Carlson and this draft pick so you don't take him. So, and that ended up being, I mean, William Karlsson isn't a 40-goal scorer, so that was like that one season, but you're not going to want to see these teams broker deals where they're giving Seattle a king's ransom just to fix issues because they'll gladly take it and have a glut of these issues. Seattle is going to be the big cap alleviator for all of these teams that are no doubt going to have issues. And the best way you can protect yourself from feeling like you're forced to do something is to have that plan already in place that you're all taken care of. At least we're fortunate, you'll remember 3 years ago, because all their core players were under the age of eligibility, like Matthews and Marner. So they were able to protect way more, and the cost was Brendan Leipzig. So it's a way different situation now. So you know you're going to have to lose someone. So you don't want to trade away that person for the fear of not getting anything. I think you're just going to have to make sure who you know what it is on that team or a good sense of it and plan accordingly.
So we've been talking about trades a lot this like hour about that we've been talking. Do you have just like a perfect target for the Leafs, like someone you look at and say, I want that person on the Leafs?
I don't specifically. I try to just kind of keep objective about this and an arm's length away. The other hard part of this season is when you're on the daily beat of a team. Is the division's so small that even players have admitted this, that they're really not watching other games outside of the teams of consequence. Like, it's hard to know what's going on in the East. Really. You see who's good. Like you see social media clips. You see, based on reporters you follow and stories you read, who's doing well, who isn't doing well. But this year is such a weird year for evaluation with COVID that I think your best situation is trying to look and improve from within. But I mean, if the Leafs are in a situation where teams are going to throw high quality players for not a lot of cost, they're definitely going to jump and try and take that. But I can't see someone out there that they're like, this is that player. I think from a veteran standpoint, they addressed a lot of those issues with the cap space that they had in guys like Simmons, guys like Thornton, who are great power play guys who can add to that scoring. And you saw that so early in the season, or even up until 4 games ago, with how red hot their power play was. And just an overall commitment to defense that their forwards were playing better defensively. Sure, William Nylander's not scoring, and John Tavares only has 1 even strength goal, but they're playing, with the exception of the last couple of games, they're playing really well defensively. That a lot of the games last year that fans used to get so upset about were mistakes that they were just running and gunning and going too far and just leaving assignments and leaving themselves exposed, and they're not doing that this year. And like, that's got to give Leaf fans optimism in that regard, that they don't really need to go out and be like, I need this guy. It's more so they just have to continue taking care of their own business, and then at the trade deadline do that thing that they've done every year, although this time maybe they add like a top 6, where in the past it was always just like a bottom player or someone that they have just the right amount of space for, because remember, they were under long-term injured reserve, so they didn't have a lot of accrued cap space in previous years. Now they actually have some of that, and so they can actually flex that maneuverability a little bit. So yeah, it's I can't see anyone out there that they're like, they must get this guy. I don't see that for them. I see that they need to continue to kind of build their identity and fix issues that they still kind of have, but are getting better at it, that do seem encouraging.
Well, I think all of us are out of questions. Do you have any closing thoughts just before we end this?
Oh, me?
Yep.
Yeah, closing thoughts. It's been a weird year. I think now more than ever, we try to let fans know what's going on. I think I'm one of the few reporters traveling this season.
Oh.
Which has been a really weird experience. Like, I'm planning to tell more of that story as the season goes along. So I've been to 5 buildings already in this, traveling as safe as I possibly can, just so that we can tell the story. And yeah, it's been really bizarre, really weird, but a privilege to be able to do it and to come on your podcast and to be able to share that kind of stuff for sure.
Well, thank you so much, David, for coming on today.
No problem.
We really couldn't appreciate it anymore.
Hey, no problem. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
So thanks everyone for watching this another episode of Tundra Cast, and we'll see you guys next time.